Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 22nd. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing, making beer at home. Well, this week we talked to Brian Ellis, a member of the KGB. That's the Kuykendahl Gran Brewers, a home brewing club out of Houston, Texas. We talked to Brian to get a peek inside an active homebrew club. The KGB has about 150 members, meets regularly, and sponsors an annual Big Batch Brew Bash homebrew competition. We'll talk to Brian in a couple of minutes. Well, I haven't been overwhelmed with response from last week's video version of our podcast, but the comments I have received have been very positive. There were a couple of technical glitches that we had, but I think we've got those worked out. I want to thank Brian in Inglewood, Colorado for being especially helpful because he owns a video iPod and was able to test the video for me. Maybe Santa will bring me a video iPod this year so I can test the video myself, or I can buy one next year and write it off, as a business expense. I have some ideas on how we can improve the quality of the video next time we do one, and I need to do things like introduce myself and let people know where to get in touch with us if they have comments about the show. But I think it all went pretty well, and I want to thank Steve Wilkes for coming along on the maiden voyage. Drew from Maryland wrote in to say, as the podcast went on, a noticeable deterioration of your soberness was apparent. I find that my homebrew has the same effect on me. He says, I chuckled more and more as the show went on. Well, we did let our hair down a bit, or at least, what's left of it. I got a few wish lists that came in after we recorded the show last week. Gibby wrote in and says, I brew very infrequently due to my career and family taking up a lot of my time. He says, I brew 5 or 6 times a year, 50 liters at a time, and that's about 13 gallons for those of us on the old system. Gibby says, my wish list looks like this. I would love to replace my homemade copper counterflow chiller with a therminator. I would love to replace pH papers with a pH meter. I would like to get a regulator and stainless oxygen stone. He says, but mostly I would like more time to brew, even if I don't get these items above. Our friend Wayne from Lansdale, Pennsylvania writes, okay, below is a list of some of the stuff I would love to add to my homebrew equipment. A fermentator, that's a stainless steel fermenter from Blickman Engineering, a 40-quart brew pot with spigot from Polarware, a grain mill, a counterflow wort chiller, or a therminator, like Gibby, a stainless, Wayne elaborates and says that's a stainless steel plate-type wort chiller, a cast-iron propane burner, a cold plate draft box, a nitrogen draft system for stout, and, of course, a separate temperature-controlled room attached to the house that is designed and engineered by a brewmaster flown in from Germany for brewing my own beer and pumped to my basement tap room. Wayne says, now I just need to hit the lottery, and all these dreams can come true. Well, good luck with that, Wayne. I hope you do hit the lottery. CJ from Frederick, Maryland says, I know this is a bit late, but I wanted to put in my wish for Christmas, a wort chiller. CJ's got simple wishes this year. CJ says, I only hope that Santa knows what I want, because at least if I haven't been good all year, I have brewed good beer. Well, I think you get points for that, CJ. He says, also, thanks again for the great program. Definitely my favorite podcast. Well, thanks, CJ. There's a lot to choose from out there. I appreciate that comment. And thanks again to everybody who shared their holiday wish lists for this past show. Well, Christmas is a time for sharing, and the guys at Craft Brew News Radio, or Pacific Brew News Radio, I'll combine them together there. The guys at Pacific Brew News Radio and Craft Beer Radio and I have been sharing beers. I sent each of them a 6-pack of homebrew, and if you listen to Pacific Brew News Radio this week, Rick and Mark sampled and judged a porter of mine. Very exciting. They seemed to like the beer and had some very useful, constructive criticism. So if you want to hear that, go to pacificbrewnews.com. And I appreciate Rick and Mark taking the time to do that. I sent them 5 beers and a mead, and one of the beers is an extract. I challenged them to pick it out, and I'll be interested to see if they can do that. I sent the same 6-pack to Jeff and Greg at Craft Beer Radio, and a few days ago, I got beer from Jeff. It's a 6-pack of 3 different homebrew batches that Jeff Bear made, and I can't wait to taste them. I've had a cold the past few days, you might be able to tell, so I haven't been able to taste anything. But the cold is just about gone, and I can't wait to sample. So thanks to Jeff for sending the brews. And, Rick, I'm still waiting for the shipment from California. Well, looking in the mailbag, Tim from Frisco, Texas, writes with a couple of questions. He says, I'm preparing to go from 5-gallon batches to 10-gallon batches and was concerned about my 50-foot immersion chiller working well enough to chill the wort to pitching temperatures. My concern is not as much during the colder months, but during the hot Texas summers. Well, Tim, living in Arkansas, I can definitely identify with having hot summers, and chilling with an immersion chiller when the groundwater warms up is a challenge, especially with 10-gallon batches. When I make big batches, I chill them outside, and what I've tried recently is to coil the garden hose leading up to the chiller and put it into a tub or other container filled with ice. This cools the water down a bit before it gets to the beer and helps to get the temperature below 80 degrees, which seems to be the challenge, getting down below 80 to a pitching temperature. Alternately, you might want to look at something like a counterflow chiller or even something more high-tech like the Therminator that Wayne and Gibby mentioned earlier. If you're concerned about chilling times, you might want to step up to the next level of chiller. Tim continues with regard to iodophore, how important is it that the sanitized items thoroughly dry before use? If they do not dry, will there be iodine flavors in your finished beer? And what about sanitizing the night before you brew? Do you think it's okay to leave the equipment sitting overnight, or is there too much of a risk for possible infection? Well, I use iodophore, and in a perfect world, you'd have time to let everything dry completely. But in reality, when I'm brewing, there are some items that I forget to sanitize until the last minute, and they're not completely dry when I use them. I think as long as you use the proper dilution strength, I don't think you have anything to worry about with a little bit of iodophore solution giving you off flavors. I would not leave sanitized items sitting overnight to dry because I don't think you need to. Of course, there are those who think differently, including one homebrew store owner that I talked to. He said he could taste iodophore in every beer where the brewer had used it. I personally think he's imagining things, and I think all the professional brewers out there who use it would agree. But if you're concerned about iodophore off flavors, you could do what Casey from Siloam Springs does. Casey sanitizes with iodophore, then he rinses everything with boiled water. So it's all in what makes you happy and what you feel comfortable with. Mike from Los Angeles writes with some thoughts about yeast. He says, I thought that your series with Dave Logston was fantastic. Well, thanks. In particular, I got hung up on an analogy Dave made about the differences between yeast strains. Dave explained the difference in yeast flavor profiles as being similar to the differences between one loaf of bread and another. Mike says, it got me thinking, has anyone tried making bread with beer yeast? Maybe it would be wasteful to make a loaf of bread with a fresh activator pack of Y yeast, but I wonder how things would go if I use an older culture that's just sitting in my fridge or even on a recultured basis. I just thought he says, just a thought I figured I'd share. Well, that's interesting. I'm sure it would work. I wonder if anybody out there's made bread with old beer yeast. By the way, Mike says, to prove what a geek I am, I noticed in the November 3rd podcast a comment to the effect, and this was from Dave. He said, only brewers reuse yeast. And Mike says that's not entirely true. Bakers reuse their yeast when they make a good sourdough starter. So, good point. Finally, Jason wrote in from Pennsylvania. He says, I currently live in Berwick, Pennsylvania, but I'm going to be moving to Houston, Texas in early January. In your All Grain podcast, John Palmer mentioned that Houston has a problem with alkaline water. This concerned me that I might have a problem with my brews when I move. Jason says, I brew mostly all extract and mini mash brews. I'm wondering if the alkaline water will affect my brews as well. Well, sometimes timing is everything. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, Brian Ellis from Houston is joining us this week to talk about his homebrew club. So I emailed Brian and asked if he would help address Jason's concerns about Houston's water. Brian agreed to do so, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jason becomes the next new member of the KGB. So thanks to Brian for helping a fellow homebrewer out. And speaking of Brian, I got a letter from Brian several weeks ago suggesting that I do a show on homebrew clubs. I thought it was a great idea, so when it came time to do a show on the topic, I thought I'd go straight to the source. So Brian Ellis was more than happy to talk about his homebrew club in Houston, Texas. Well, we're here to talk about the KGB, and it's not the KGB that most people are familiar with. Tell us about your KGB.
Well, we have a homebrew club called the Kuykendahl Gran Brewers, and we just call it the KGB, the acronym, and we play off obviously the old Russian KGB, no longer around, but we still keep that because everybody remembers it, and it's just kind of fun. And we have a tagline. Our tagline is "Join the Party," KGB.
And I guess you guys have a little more fun than the old, more familiar KGB. I hope.
I would hope so. We really do have a good time.
Well, first of all, before we get into detail about talking about your club, tell us a bit about your experience in home brewing, how long you've been brewing, and I understand you've won some contests and such. So now's your time to brag.
I'm not really one to brag, but when it comes to beer and people ask, I'll tell them where I've been, what I've done. Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of gloat, so to speak. But I started back when I was mid-20s. I'm 38 right now, and I started after college, graduated college, did my college 5-year tour, and got married and had a child, and somewhat settled down, bought a house, and I started appreciating different types of beer, and because of that, some relatives of mine, actually my parents, thought it'd be kind of neat to buy me a gift, and it was called the beer machine. And that's a pretty neat product, but I really didn't know what it was all about. I didn't know what I was doing, and so I tried it a couple times, and oh boy, there was one incident where it exploded in the kitchen, and I think my wife was about to divorce me of 2 years. So I had to figure out a way to do it a little bit outside, number one, and number two, maybe a little bit better techniques. And I bought a book from a local homebrew shop, locally here in Houston. It's called the DeFalco's Homebrew Supply. And I went there, bought a book. I read it. Actually, my first book I bought is Dave Miller's Brewing World's Great Beer. So,
and at what point did you get involved with the KGB?
Well, I brewed myself, by myself, for about a year. And I guess that puts it back to about 1996 is when I joined the KGB. I found out about the club itself through the homebrew shop. This club did spawn from that homebrew shop. Actually, there was 2 locations at the time, and this was the northern location. I live in the north side of town, and they mentioned when I bought some ingredients for I was making an all-grain batch at the time, and they said, have you thought about joining our KGB club? I was like, well, I haven't thought about it, but let me think about it. So I went back, and I realized people got tired of me talking about beer at work and at home, and so I thought, well, let me go talk to people that care. So I walked up on, I believe it was in April 1996, into a gentleman's. The KGB had a meeting at somebody's house. Walked into the garage, and with open arms, they invited me in, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I found out that, especially when I first started getting into home brewing, it's hard to stop talking about home brewing when someone asks you a question about it, even though their eyes start to glaze over. And but if you get into a batch of home brewers, you can go all day, and nobody's eyes will glaze over.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to somebody and they like hearing it and they interject.
Well, tell me a bit about the history of the KGB.
Well, sure. The history of the KGB, they started, it was, like I mentioned, it spawned from a home brew shop. And basically, it was back in 94, I believe. And the employee as well as customers, they were already getting together weekly. And they came up with some ideas to be a little bit more organized, and they created this club called the KGB. The first czar, which we call our president, officer, when he joined, he immediately was voted in as czar. He had some experience and was associated with another homebrew club locally here in Houston called the Foam Rangers. They've been around many moons, I believe, over 30 years.
Wow.
And we started back in 94 just for the simple fact of it's a big city and it's hard to get around sometimes. So another club, it was easy for another club to start up, and it did spawn from a local homebrew shop. And then a little bit more history. It was loosely started, and then finally got a little bit more organized by 96. Bylaws were actually created, and bylaws were designed specifically to get a checking account, more of a nonprofit organization type checking account. And that was back, I believe, in 96. And then that really kind of, from 96 to about 97, 98, was a time period of formalization. It really got a lot more formal. Bylaws were created. Specifically, the bylaws spell out what the purpose of the club is, and actually I have that written down here. I prepared myself, but I'll read the mission of the KGB.
Okay.
The mission of the KGB shall be to promote and participate in the science and craft of brewing beer products of sugar fermentation. In doing so, the KGB shall produce periodic publications, which is a newsletter, and conduct informational meetings on brewing and fermenting of malted grains. Of course, we have a monthly meeting that we meet, and we do technical presentations. So that was created, and then in 97, 98, I got involved, became an officer. In 96, actually, we created a homebrew competition, an AHA-sanctioned homebrew competition that our club sponsored, and it's called the Big Batch Brew Bash. And that's a whole story in itself, but it's a great competition. It's a single-style competition, and unless I'm proven correctly, I believe it's the only and the largest single-style AHA-sanctioned homebrew competition. So that leaves us going to 97, 98. I get involved. I become involved with the club. I started out when I joined in 96, and in 97, I was voted in as the ruble collector. And by trade, that actually is a treasurer. And by trade, I'm an accountant. So it's just easy fit. So
the club started out in kind of an informal way, but why go in a more formal direction? What are the benefits, or why, if you've got a group of brewers who are now meeting, just at somebody's house every week or so, or, every month, right, what would be the benefits of writing bylaws and getting, into a more formal club structure?
I think there's some benefits, but it has to be, the members have to decide that this is what we want to do. It's not just the officers decide this. Starting up a club, there's another actual club in the Houston area that they want to maintain a looseness to it. They don't want to be as structured. They don't want to be as structured, and that other clubs are. The benefits of being structured, I guess, and it's just a different way of doing the organization. It's not a bad thing, but the difference really is you can get things done a little bit more efficiently and cleanly, and you're dealing with people's money. And when you're dealing with people's money, you got to be very organized. Here's the accountant talking, but it's true. When you're dealing with people's money, you don't want to be a loosely operated group. If you're not dealing with people's money, then okay, it can be operated loosely. But when it comes to money, and as this the Homebrew Club KGB started growing, it really started bringing in more members, which means more funds, which means we were able to do more things for the membership. But that was dealing with a lot more money.
And you don't want Brian putting club dues in his personal checking account and
exactly.
So tell me about, you said that you were able to do some things for the members. How much are the dues and where do those go to?
Well, our dues are only $20 a year, and what that gets you, of course, is a monthly publication to the newsletter. Obviously, you can go to the meetings. You don't have to pay to go to the meetings, but your $20 just helps the club maintain financially. It's a very nominal fee, and what that gets you, in addition to the newsletter, you get some discounts to local homebrew supply stores, as well as you can get propane discounts that I've just recently found out. Local brew pubs, some discounts on the pints of beer. So that's a pretty good benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But more important to that, the whole purpose of the club, and that's really to help people learn more about beer, specifically bettering their homemade beer, learning more techniques. And there's a huge benefit of going to the actual meetings and learning specific techniques in homemade making beer.
From your own personal experience, how did your skills improve? Where were you at before you joined, and then where are you now, and how much has the club membership helped you out in that way?
Yeah, when I joined, I was already brewing. We have members that join, and we have members that don't brew at all. They just appreciate beer. But they say they intend on making beer, but they do participate. But when I joined, I was already making beer. I was already actually making all grain beer. But like I mentioned, the reason I wanted to join is just so I can have a voice and I can hear what other people are talking about, learning more about beer. And it's true. Once you really start networking, so to speak, and learning more what other people are doing, specific brewing techniques, tricks of the trade, so to speak, you really start practicing that, and better beer comes. You yield better beer, and there's also a benefit of getting more knowledge about homebrew competitions. I got into sending beer off to get tasted and see if I can get a ribbon, and I was real fortunate to get a few ribbons in my day because I was able to learn all this stuff through the club. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can buy books, and I bought books. I have a huge library. I use them as my resource. I've read all of them. But there's nothing like if you have a quick question to go and talk to somebody you just met at that club meeting or a couple months ago or something like that through the club. It really is a big benefit to your beer.
And there's also a benefit to having other, kind of experienced tasters tasting your brew, and, if there is a little defect or something that you can improve on, they can point that out rather than, just serving your beer to your family and having them say, yeah, this is great,
Yeah, you really get an honest feedback, I tell you, and that is true. That is, you get that instant feedback from somebody that knows about beer, as opposed to somebody say, oh, this is horrible. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and you get it's the difference between someone who just is used to American style pilsners, drinking a good homebrew,
right,
and not knowing what they're tasting, and then someone who is experienced and maybe even has some experience in judging competitions, giving you some actual feedback to help you match the styles and to help you improve your beers and improve your chances in competitions. So you do the annual Big Batch Brew Bash.
Very good.
And did I? Well, I'm reading off the website. I'm cheating.
Sure.
But this past year this past one was porters. Is that what I read?
I believe so. Yes, the robust porters.
And then the next one is going to be an Imperial IPA.
Yes, sir.
And the part of the spoils, part of the winnings or the prize is to brew. Is it at a local brew pub and have a batch of your brew actually be brewed in the brew pub? Is that what I read?
And that's what you read. Is actually St. Arnold's is a microbrewery.
Ah.
And they're a very successful microbrewery. They're one of the few that have been fairly successful down here in Texas. We had the go-around of a whole bunch of brew pubs that opened up. I don't want to get too much into this, but unfortunately a lot of them went away. And so when St. Arnold's opened up, I believe it's been about 10 plus years, about 10 plus years. We have a really tight relationship with them as homebrewers, and their marketing's been really ingenious. They don't really do the big radio and big mega brewer type stuff. They use the homebrewers, and they know if homebrewers drink it, they drink good beer, they're going to come and buy my beer.
And they like to talk about beer, as we've said before.
Exactly.
So the winner of this competition gets to brew a big batch of their own beer that gets released as a special release from the brewery. Exactly,
and a little history on the Big Batch Brew Bash. It really spawned from a Christmas meeting that our club had at the brewery back, I believe, in '95. And after that meeting, a gentleman by the name of John Donaldson, who is an excellent brewer, and he has been around with our club just about since the infancy, and he really spawned the idea of the Big Batch Brew Bash with a couple other people. And we built a relationship with the owners of the microbrewery, and they thought it'd be a great idea. And I believe the first one was in '96. And the intent was, and the draw was, the winner, potentially that winning recipe will be the next beer that they're going to make and distribute. And it did. And actually it was a porter. And it actually was tweaked and was created by St. Arnold's as a stout. It's their winter stout, which is still in production today.
And as I think I read that at the 10th annual Big Batch Brew Bash, there were 73 porters entered. So that's got to be challenging to judge. I mean, it's got to be challenging to judge a standard homebrew contest with all the different categories, but how is that different to judge a contest with just the single category?
Well, it is a challenge. We do it all the same day, and I was the organizer back in '98, and at that time it was wheat, I believe was the style, and we actually had a couple categories. We did a dark wheat, light wheat. We did a wheat bock, I believe. So it was a little bit more challenging when it comes to that, because there's really only first, second, third place, and you can have an excellent Hefeweizen, and it gets beat out because of the heavier beers people have been drinking or judging all day, overpower those lighter beers. But the single style, we just have a really good grouping of BJCP judges here, and of course everybody probably knows that's Beer Judge Certification Program and AHA, and we in conjunction with other homebrew clubs locally here in Houston, we have ample people to come out and judge, so we judge them in numbers.
Just regularly, what's a regular meeting like with the KGB?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, we drink beer.
Surely not.
No, seriously, we have built a really good agenda, and it may be very similar to other clubs. We try to still be somewhat loose. Even though we're organized, we try to still have fun and not make it too political or what have you. We really try to make it fun, and we like to invite people to the meetings. They don't have to join; they can come. We like to bring your family, what have you. So, and we are we try to be very family oriented as well as conscious about we are drinking beer, making sure people are safe and don't drink too much and whatnot. But we start out with a social, just people coming in slowly. Typically, it's going to be either at somebody's house, or it's going to be at a brew pub, or it's going to be at just a good beer bar, or the homebrew shop, or the microbrewery. But we've really built over the years a pretty good agenda, and it's pretty much stuck the last couple of years. But you start out the first hour, doing a little social, people tasting beer that they want other people to taste and whatnot. If there is an event, for example, we have club homebrew competitions. Just people in our club can do these competitions, can actually get their beer entered and get a ribbon. It's real small, usually you have about 40 or 30 people that actually enter beers. But if that's going on at a particular meeting, then that gets implemented pretty quick. So by the end of the meeting, we can announce who the winners are. We do the judging, but we always have food. Like I said, we try to be conscious about people drinking beer, but being safe. And every meeting is different theme, different type of food. We have chili cook-offs. We have salsa cook-offs or salsa competitions. There's always food. We have a Spud Fest, just baked potatoes and a whole bunch of toppings. We have a steak out where we grill steaks outside. That's in the summertime. So we always have food. There's always a keg of the month. It's a homemade beer or several keg of the month. Several different people have brewed one. So that's always on tap. We usually have another commercial brewery beer on tap, but not necessarily always the case. I'd say about 50% of the time. And then we get into official business. The Czar puts on an actual Russian KGB hat. I forgot where that came from, but he actually wears this KGB hat, and he welcomes everybody to the group and does any kind of thank yous and talks a little bit about the past month or the last meeting or any old business, any kind of announcements. He mentions announcements and if there's anything to bring to light from the club, any items that they need to act upon or vote upon. And then people go on their business, and we break a little bit, and then we get into a beer of the month. And this is our technical presentation, where our Commissar Brewski, it's a title that somebody's given as an officer that their responsibility is to go out and find beer, however they want to do it, whether it's by style, whether it's a horizontal or a vertical, just one brewery, or a regional, or just all brew pub beer, or whatever they want to do. And they come back and they talk about not only the history of this beer, the style, the BJCP style guidelines, but we of course we drink it while we're getting some information, but also technical. This turns into more of a technical presentation as well. Sometimes we go out and I believe it was last summer we did Mexican beers. Well, people got to really smell that skunky smell. So, we try to really honestly stick to our mission, and that's to learn about beer and in a lighthearted way, but at the same time, learn about beer.
Well, it sounds like you have fun. And how many people are in the club, and about how many come to the meetings?
About a third come to the meeting. No more than about 50. We have about 156 members. When I was the Czar, there was less than 40, and that was in 1998. So the club's incredibly grown, and a lot of this growth happened probably, I'd say, about 3 or 4 years ago. It really just started picking up, and I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but I noticed the correlation that as the brew pubs started going away, for some reason people started wanting to make homemade beer. So,
well, I guess there is good and bad.
Yeah, exactly. So, good. It's good for the club, and and the beauty of it is the more people you have, obviously you have the membership fees and dues that help bring in more beer and more things that we can do, more events and more benefits to the members as a whole. But these people, our members, they have jobs and they go travel and they can bring back beers that we can't get here locally. So every meeting we always have beer that you can't get here, and so that's another great benefit.
Well, if listeners out there want to know more about the Kuykendahl Gran Brewers Club, where can they go to find that out?
Well, they can simply, of course, go to our website, which is thekgb.org.
That's thekgb.org.
Correct.
Don't just go to kgb.org because that's like some security firm or something.
That's right.
So
that's right.
thekgb.org.
thekgb.org.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Brian, and I wish you luck with the club.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your podcast. I'm looking forward to not only this issue, but the next ones in the future.
Thank you, sir. Well, thanks again to Brian Ellis for telling us about the KGB. I'll put a link to his club's site, along with a link to the page on the American Homebrew Association's site on how to set up a homebrew club from scratch. Well, next week we head south of the border with Chris Colby of Brew Your Own magazine as we talk about Vienna lagers. And in a couple of weeks we'll hear an interview with Ray Daniels, author of Designing Great Beers, as we talk about hop bitterness and the factors in brewing that influence IBUs. Very exciting. It was a great interview. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And I want to, while we're on the subject of the site, I want to say thank you to everybody who's clicked on our Amazon.com Associates link and has ordered some Christmas items and such through the site. I appreciate the support there. And don't forget, we've got T-shirts and everything, T-shirts for sale, and we've also, if you're wanting to get into home brewing for the first time, while you're on our site, you can check out our DVD, Basic Brewing: Introduction to Extract Home Brewing. We'll walk you through the process step by step. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVD while you're on the site, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online. Well, that's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time. So long.